Welcome back, everyone, to the latest episode of An American in Thailand. We air this program every Friday, and it is broadcast to you from Ratchamakan, the University of Technology, Peranakan. This program comes in two parts. In the first part, I will introduce a certain topic about being an American here living in Thailand. Could be about food or travel, culture. We'll switch it up each week. And then we'll take a break, and in the second part of the program, we'll get into some examples and some more specifics. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gary Gray, and I am your host for the American in Thailand program. Sometimes that's a little hard to say, an American in Thailand program. And I am an English teacher here at Ratchamakan, University of Technology, Peranakan. I have been teaching here for about 8 years now, actually a little bit more than that. As of this recording, we are just starting our new semester, so I'm moving into my 9th year. So I've been here just a little over 8 years. So I've been here long enough in Thailand that I have a pretty good feel for the culture. I'm still learning things. I learn new things every day, but I have a pretty good idea. And so for today's topic, we're going to talk about kind of the differences in fashion. And I don't just mean the clothes we wear, although we will talk about clothes. Other sorts of things as well that go along with that. How you make up your appearance and things like that. And maybe some accessories, all that sort of stuff. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to be talking about fashion. Now, I should tell you that I am not very knowledgeable about fashion. So what we're going to be talking about isn't like some really complicated details of fashion. We're not going to be talking about high fashion and glamour and that sort of thing. What we'll be talking about here is very basic differences. Like different types, like the differences in the types of clothes that maybe will be worn in America versus what would be worn in Thailand. And it's not just going to be clothing. We might talk about things like makeup or accessories, whether it's jewelry or handbags, or I will tell you that there's not a big difference in jewelry, so we're not going to talk too much about that. Handbags, we will. That's an interesting topic. And some of these differences are culturally related. Some of them may just be related to the weather, because it's so much hotter here in Thailand, so we wear different clothes. Now, I should say that most of the fashion is very similar. Most traditional Asian dress is not worn too much anymore, although you do still see some of that, and that is one of the cultural differences that we're going to talk about in here. But you don't see too much of that. So the way I just see people walking around on the streets here in Thailand is almost exactly the same as the way I see people walking around on the street in America. It's the same thing. Okay. So again, there are some differences that are more cultural. There are some that are more just kind of related to the weather. Some examples of some cultural differences would be the color of some of the clothing we wear. And I hesitate on that one a little bit because there's kind of two things. One is more just a fashion thing, and one is more of a deeper cultural issue. We'll talk about that more in the second half of our program when we get into more of the details. So there's kind of the color of the clothes we wear. That's one difference. Another difference is handbags. You may wonder, how are those different? We have the same handbags here in Thailand as people have in America. Even a lot of the same brands. How is that different? Again, there's a cultural difference about who will be carrying a handbag. Okay? And the next item on my list is related to that, and so you maybe can figure out what I mean by who's carrying a handbag, being a difference. Is makeup being worn by men. So as I said, it's not all about clothes, it's also about makeup and accessories. Handbag is not clothes, that's an accessory. Makeup being worn by men. Now, most men here in Thailand do not wear makeup. Right? So, not really much of a difference. Still, there is some difference, and we will talk about that. And that's not even really just a Thai thing versus an American thing. It's more of an East Asian thing versus a Western thing. And especially an American thing. Europe is maybe kind of in between. So more of an American thing. So it's more of an East Asian versus an American thing. So again, that topic is about men wearing makeup. Another cultural difference is something I've already mentioned, and that's the Thai costumes. Now, that's not a big difference because most people here in Thailand do not wear Thai costume dress in their normal everyday dress for work or school or whatever. But you do sometimes see it. For example, here at the university, a lot of the administrators a lot of times will wear like a Thai shirt, which is a different kind of style than a Western shirt. So they'll wear a Thai shirt. Sometimes you'll see some of the women wearing like a Thai skirt, which, I mean, women wear skirts in America. It's very similar, but the style of the skirt is slightly different, and it seems like a little bit more of a traditional Thai style here in Thailand. So you do see it worn a little bit here. So that's another difference. That's another difference related to culture. And then there's some differences that are just related to weather. For example, you people here in Thailand are usually wearing light clothing. I don't mean light in color. I mean light as in not heavy, not thick clothing. Because it's so hot. So in America, there's a lot more people wearing thicker clothing. And that gets into like winter weather clothing. So winter weather clothing is a lot more common in America than it is in Thailand. Now, we do need to talk about some details there in the second part of the program because that's not always true. For one, there's plenty of hot weather in America. It's very hot in America right now as we're recording this program, for example. It's almost, what is that, about 42 degrees? It's almost 42 degrees in New York City. I think I have that right. I think 42. I could be off there a little bit. I'm not sure. It could be 38, could be 40, something. I'm not entirely sure exactly, but it's around that. It's somewhere 40-ish in New York City today, or will be. As of the time we're recording this, it's nighttime in New York. And New York is pretty far north in America, a pretty cold area, and it's going to be around 40. So, very hot sometimes. So when I talk about winter clothing in America, it's not all the time. Also, here in Thailand, we get usually a couple days where it cools off a little bit. And even though for me, coming from America, it just feels nice, I know for a lot of Thai people it actually feels cold. So Thai people will sometimes wear sort of that same winter clothing that Americans would wear during those few cooler days. So it's not entirely a difference there, but there still are some differences. Okay, so we're going to talk about more details related to these differences in the second part of our program. But I do want to say again that generally speaking, it's actually quite similar. It's actually quite similar. What I see people wearing around here in Thailand, it's the same thing we wear in America. The gentleman who's producing this program for us is sitting right in the next room here next to me. He has on a t-shirt, but a work t-shirt, a nice t-shirt, like a polo shirt. He has on a polo shirt and normal pants that you would wear to go to work. We call those slacks in English. He has slacks on. Just like anyone might wear in America, going to work. Some people dress up more nicely with a suit and a tie, but that just depends on where you work. Not everyone does that. That depends on where you work. And that's the way most people dress here. So, generally speaking, the fashions are quite similar. But I will say that there definitely are some differences, and those differences do sometimes stand out. You will notice them when you see them, because you're so used to everything being the same, because everyone here dresses the same as they do in America. But not always. So when you see the difference, you notice it. So there are definitely some things that I have noticed. Okay, so we will talk about more of those details in the second half of our program. Right now, let's just take a quick break. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so for today's episode, we are talking about the fashion differences between Thailand and America. All right, so let's just go back to the same points we mentioned in the first part of the program, but I want to talk about a little more detail, give some more specifics. So we talked about the differences being either cultural or weather-related in the different fashions that you see here in Thailand versus America. And also remember that I did mention that there aren't a lot of differences. But because there aren't a lot of differences, you really do notice those differences. In other words, most people here in Thailand are dressed up exactly the same way someone in America would be dressed up. All right, so there's just no difference. But because there are some differences, I just said there's no difference. There are differences. But because there are some differences like that, you really notice them when they happen. So, under the cultural ones, the first thing I mentioned were the color of the clothes people wear. There's two different things here. One is just kind of basic culture. One is more of a deeper culture. And the one that's more basic culture is I notice that people wear white clothes here more often, especially pants, and especially men, like white jeans. Now, a lot of people don't wear white jeans. Most people don't wear white jeans. But it's not weird to wear white jeans. In fact, it's kind of stylish. They kind of look nice. I like them. I like white jeans. I think they look nice. In America, that is, for some reason, I'm not even really sure why, that is viewed as weird for men to wear white jeans. I don't know why. I have noticed that in Europe, it is more common as well, kind of like it is here in Thailand. So I don't know if Thailand got that from Europe or if America doesn't like it because it's European. I'm really not even sure why it's considered weird in America. And it's not that nobody in America will do that, but if you see a man with white jeans in America, it's kind of like, ooh, wow, that's different, that's unique, that's a little crazy. Here in Thailand, it's just normal. I mean, most people don't. I'm not saying it's that common, but there's nothing odd about it. There's nothing weird about it. There's nothing strange about seeing a guy wear white pants. Okay, and the deeper cultural one is, again, it's going to be related to men. So we have a lot of these fashion differences are on the male side. You're going to see that with almost all of these. There's going to be a few, like the Thai costumes. I kind of mentioned this in the beginning with the skirt in the first part of our program, which applies to women. Most of these differences apply to men. And it's because of the deep cultural issues in America. America, even though it's thought of as being kind of very progressive and forward, maybe thought of a little bit less of that right now because of things that are going on there, but generally that's kind of the way people think of America. Freedom, all that sort of stuff. But actually, it's one of the most religious countries in the advanced world. When I say in the advanced world, I mean the industrialized world. So we're not including some of the poorer countries out there. A lot of poorer countries, like in the Middle East, are very religious. A lot of poorer countries in Africa are very religious. Some of them are more religious with Christianity. Some of them are more religious with Islam. Some of the Southeastern Asian countries are quite religious, and some of those are more religious with Buddhism. And I'm talking about the really wealthy, advanced countries like Canada, the U.S., most of the European countries, things like that, Japan, South Korea, all of those sorts of countries. Among those, America is one of the most, and I actually think they may be the most religious country. And part of religion, at least within the most popular religion that they have there, which is Christianity, within that religion there's a lot of talk about certain roles for men versus women. And because of that, they don't like to cross the line a lot, which is why even today there's a lot of debate over trans people in America, because it's kind of a really touchy subject, because it's male, female sort of thing. And so we even see that with fashion. They don't like to cross over fashion. And so there are colors that are seen as more feminine in Western culture. And men, you do not often see wearing those colors in America. It's becoming a little more common now, partly because America is becoming a little less religious over time. So it is becoming more common. But there is still kind of this hesitancy for men to wear certain colors. For example, for a man to wear a purple shirt here in Thailand, so what? You're wearing a purple shirt. Who cares? In America, ooh, that would look kind of bold. Again, it happens more now, so it's not like you're never going to see a man wearing a purple shirt. It happens. You'll see it now, and especially in cities where it's a little bit more cosmopolitan, you'll see it. But generally, you will see fewer men wearing what are considered to be feminine colors, like purple or pink, things like that, colors like that. You'll see a lot of them wearing just white shirts or light blue shirts, things like that. That's kind of like the most common color shirt for men to wear, especially like for work attire. For like a shirt that you button down, it's going to be white. it's going to be blue. Sometimes maybe brown, although that's a weird color for matching purposes for fashion, so not often that, but it could be brown. Sometimes it might even be green, like I'm wearing a green shirt now. For those watching on video, you can see it. It's kind of a light green. It's okay. That would be okay in America for a man. But yeah, we don't, in America, there's less crossover for the genders, and that does translate into fashion. And so there are colors that are kind of viewed as effeminate, and men shouldn't wear them. Shouldn't wear those colors. And these next two items are exactly the same reason. And our next one is handbags. Here in Thailand, a lot of men will have handbags. It is still more women than men that'll have a handbag. But in America, almost no men carry handbags. They may have a bag, but it's a larger one with more, kind of for more stuff, it's considered more business-like, and so that's considered okay. Because, the man needs to have his business stuff with him. Again, it's a very old-fashioned attitude about gender roles. So it's the man. He can have a big case with him with all of his work stuff in it. But to carry a small handbag, purse, something like that. Even here in Thailand, there are still some of those gender role issues. You will see more of that with women than men. Most men here are not seen carrying like a small handbag around. But there are plenty of men who do. In my classes that I teach, just about every class that has at least 10 people in it, there's at least one guy with a small handbag in the class. At least one. Sometimes there are lots of them, but there's at least one. So it's not uncommon. There's not that same kind of prejudice against that. And it's the same thing with our next issue. Makeup for men. Now that's less common here in Thailand than even the handbags. The vast majority of men here in Thailand are not wearing makeup. But it's not really considered weird or crazy or... A man with makeup on is not going to be looked at as some crazy person here in Thailand. In America, they might be, especially in certain parts of America. Maybe in the city or something, you might see it occasionally. Even then, you're not going to see it very often. But if you're out in the countryside in America, that person is going to be looked at like they're weird. And again, that gets down to the whole gender thing about, that's for women and that's for men. And America is more strict that way, keeping those things separate. Asia is not. In fact, Thailand is actually somewhat more conservative than some other Asian countries in regard to that, even though I still see plenty of men wearing makeup here. For example, something I mentioned in some of my other programs, in South Korea, 30% of makeup sales are made by men, are purchases made by men. 30%. That's a large percentage. That's almost half as many as the number of women, because that means the women are going to be 70%. So that's like almost a third of the people buying makeup in South Korea are men. So it's not that uncommon in Asia. It's still not so common, even in South Korea, where it's probably the most common in all of Asia. That's still 30-70. So it's still mostly the women wearing makeup. So pretty much everywhere in the world still kind of believes that makeup is for women, not for men. But there's less of that thinking in most Asian countries. So that's another difference you're going to see in fashion between America and Thailand. And the last one I listed that has to do with culture is the Thai costumes. And we talked about this a little bit in the first part of the program, where that's not a big difference because most people don't wear their Thai costumes here in Thailand unless it's for a special event or something. But I will say that here in my workplace at the university, sometimes some of the people, especially the high-end staff, the administrators, because they want to kind of look more formal, look more professional, will incorporate some Thai costume into their style of dress. Usually it's the men with the shirts that they're wearing, or it's the women with the skirts that they're wearing. So there's definitely a difference there. Even though, like I said, it's not a big difference because you don't see a lot of Thai costume just in the normal clothes that people wear every day out around the town here in Bangkok or anywhere else in Thailand. But you do see it sometimes. And I think from my limited experience in rural areas, there is some tendency for them to be a little more traditional. So you will see just in normal everyday activities, more people wearing traditional Thai clothes out in rural areas. So you definitely do still see it sometimes. So I don't want to make it sound like that's not a difference at all. In fact, I've seen in some rural communities it worn so often that I'm not even sure I like calling it a Thai costume. A costume is like just plain dress up. It's just traditional Thai clothing is what it is. But even my Thai friends call it a Thai costume, so I guess that's okay, but I don't know. To me, it should just be called traditional Thai dress, traditional Thai clothing. So that's another cultural difference. And in America, because we have so many people from different parts of the world there really is there's no traditional American dress. That's not to say that the clothing styles haven't changed over time. They certainly have. I mean, back in the 1700s, like high-level men would wear these powdered wigs, and they looked really silly. But that's what they wore. They would wear these big white wigs, like in the 1700s, and I think maybe even into the 1800s. I'm not sure when that trend went away. So certainly, times change. There is clothing that maybe is more traditional, more old-fashioned, more from 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Yes, certainly. Certainly there are styles and things like that, fashions, that change throughout time in America. But what I mean is like a really cultural, traditional American dress. No, we don't have anything like that. Okay, and the second issue we talked about was weather. Now this one's more simple. This is just about it being hot here. And I do see that this is one of the few differences that I see with women. Most of these so far have been with men. With women, there's a lot more women here that wear something that I think in Western culture we would call a muumuu. But that kind of has a negative view in Western culture, which I don't think which would not be intended here, because it's really just meant to be a light dress because it's so hot out. So you want to wear something light. That is much more common here. It is worn in America, but the reason it has kind of a negative connotation in America is because it tends to be worn mostly by bigger women. And so you think of it as like, oh, well, that person is too fat to find anything to fit them, so they have to wear the big muumuu. So a muumuu kind of is associated with a person being too big, particularly a woman, because it's a lady's sort of dress, and it's a loose-fitting dress, very comfortable. But here it's worn mostly because it's light, and like I said, it's also loose fitting. So it's a very cool garment. It's a very cool piece of clothing to wear in the Thai heat. So that is one difference. But as I mentioned in the first part of the program, the differences aren't that much. Because Thai people do still tend to feel cold in those few cool days we get, like in December maybe. And so you'll still see Thai people wearing cold weather stuff, like a sweater or a jacket or even a wool hat sometimes. It's obviously a lot more common in America because it gets very cold in parts of America during the winter. But like I said, it's still worn here in Thailand. So as far as it being a fashion difference, the one thing I would say is that because it's that type of clothing, that winter clothing, is worn more often in America, I do think there needs to then be more variety. And so you'll see things more creative. For example, there's a lot of fun, cute, funny, interesting type of sweaters that people wear in America. Lots of different designs. Some of them are just pretty. Some of them just look nice, interesting, look good. Some of them actually have funny designs on them, say something funny, whatever. And in fact, they even have in America sometimes around Christmas time, they have something called like ugly sweater contests, or ugly sweater parties where everyone wears their ugly Christmas sweater. And a lot of times they're not even ugly. A lot of times they're just kind of funny. They look cute, funny, whatever, but they call them ugly. So that winter weather, I guess, has more variety. It's more interesting in America simply because it's colder. We need more of that warm weather, that warm clothing to wear. And so because there's so much more made, they like to get more creative with it. Whereas here in Thailand, it's a little bit more limited. It's a little bit more limited. We're a little simpler here with the cold weather clothing. And for that same reason, I think we're actually a little more varied with the warm weather clothing, like I mentioned with the women, with the light dress that they might wear. It's more comfortable, and you don't see that too often in America. It does exist. You can find it sometimes, but it's less common. It's less common in America. So those are kind of the differences related to the weather, and it's really simple. It's really just more heavy clothes in America, lighter clothes in Thailand, and because there's more of one in one place, they like to make it in more varieties. So there's more variation in the summer styles, the hot weather styles here in Thailand. There's more variation in the cold weather styles in America. But we have basically all the same stuff. From t-shirts and shorts in the hot weather to sweaters and boots and things like that in the cold weather. So for the weather-related fashion differences, it's mostly just variety. So the real big differences are probably more of those cultural ones that we mentioned at the beginning. And like I said also, I just want to finish off repeating this, and that is that mostly the fashion is pretty much the same. So the only reason I even bother doing an episode like this is because of the fact that because the fashions are the same, when you do get one of those differences, it's really noticeable. Like for me, when I moved here, to see all the men, well, not all of them again, but so many more than what you see in America, carrying handbags. Or in my classroom, I see 2, 3, 4 of the men wearing makeup. In America, even though that's not a lot of them, because there may be 10 or 15 men if it's a big enough class, and there's only 2, 3, 4 of them wearing makeup, that's not a lot of them. But in America, that would almost always be 0. You could maybe have one person here or there in some class, but that's almost always going to be 0. So to me, seeing that here in Thailand, I was kind of surprised. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I'm not really here to judge on that. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to make people feel badly if I'm judging right or wrong in this, because it just is what it is. It's related to the culture. I will tell you, for me, just for me personally, I actually prefer the more open kind of allowing people to do what they want within fashion, the more open attitude here in Thailand. I prefer it. It's one of the things I like culturally about Thailand. It's one of the reasons I moved here. Even though I myself don't do a lot of that. Like, I don't wear makeup. I don't have a handbag. I don't even think I have a purple shirt other than the one for our university, because our university color is purple. So I have so I will wear a purple shirt sometime for that, but that's the only purple shirt I have, is the one for the university. It's probably just me from growing up in America, so I still have that in me, so I still behave that way. That's still how I do my thing. But I like that people are allowed to do whatever they want. There's more of that here in Thailand, and I think that's good. At least with fashion. Maybe in some other aspects of life, maybe America has more freedoms than Thailand. I don't know. But at least with fashion, it's a little bit more open here, and people can do what they want. So just from my own personal point of view, I actually like that. Again, I'm not here to judge, so if some people prefer the more strict, conservative, American style, I say strict and conservative. It's not very strict and conservative compared to some other countries, but just a little bit more compared to Thailand. Some people might actually prefer that. That's fine. So I'm not going to say which one is better or worse. For me, I prefer, when it comes to the few differences that there aren't many differences, but when it comes to the few differences that there are, I prefer the Thai fashion over the American fashion. That's just me. Okay, so that's it for today's program. So thank you for joining us for An American in Thailand. And let me just reach out to any young people out there who may be listening and ask them to consider attending our great university here at Ratchamakan University of Technology, Peranakan. Maybe you will have me as your teacher. Okay, so that's it for our program. Please stay with us and tune back in next week for another interesting episode. Also, do not forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.